Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 RBC Heritage Initial Research Show. First off, happy Easter to everyone out there, for he is risen. It is a great day. Unfortunately, it was not a great week for yours truly for the Masters. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I think this is the first for me in the sense that I pitched a shutout. And while I played college baseball, pitched in college, shutouts are usually a good thing. The problem is I threw it against myself this week. That's right, zero of my lineups cashed for the Masters. As I mentioned, don't think I got too much correct. I was very high on Will Zalatoris. That's ended before it started. I had very little of Jon Rahm. The tee time kind of scared me away a little bit. Of course, my chosen winner, Justin Thomas, misses the cut. Did not have a lot of the correct live players. Wasn't very high on Brooks, Patrick Reed, all of those guys. I was very high on Cameron Champ. That obviously blew up. Louis Oosthuizen blew up. So it was not a very good week. So hopefully you had much, much more success than I did. And if you did, reach out to me in chat or on social media. Let me know so I can shout you out. But we are going to try and turn the momentum around for a second straight designated event on the PGA Tour. We are at Harbor Town Golf Links. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. And quite simply, if you have Fantasy National, you don't have to listen to a moron like me and get shut out. You have the data at your hands, and you can make much smarter selections for the Masters and other tournaments, unlike me. So go check out Fantasy National. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where I post research throughout the week for the golf tournament at hand. So I will definitely have something out for your reading tomorrow around the RBC Heritage. Post that generally on Monday afternoon, Monday evening. Post that to Twitter and Instagram. And then Twitter is also where I post all of my betting cards, so that will be out Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show as well for the RBC Heritage. And then the link to my Twitch channel is also in the description. This is where I do all of my in-depth research. I also do a little baseball, some gaming, all of that type of stuff. So if you're interested in all of that content, give me a follow over at Twitch. And then lastly, I do want to remind you that over on Twitter, I have been doing a daily 3-up, 3-down for baseball. I've had some mixed results, but I'm starting to have some sustained success day after day. So if you would like to see some of my daily baseball picks, then give me a follow over at Twitter. And then finally for the intro, we are live, chat's open, want to hear how your Masters went. Hopefully you had a lot more success than I did. If you did, who did you play? Did you bet Jon Rahm outright? Did you use him a lot in your lineups? Did you avoid Rory? That might have been the one suggestion that I got correct this week, in that I was the most cautious on Rory, at least in the 10Ks and in the upper end of the projected ownerships. So did you avoid Rory? Did you avoid most of my other selections? Did you have Brooks? Did you have Patrick Reed, Jordan Spieth, all of the high-end players? How did you feel? Did you find yourself rooting for Sam Bennett, Fred Couples, all of that? So let me know how what you're taking away from this year's Masters. And then let me know also what you're thinking about wanting to focus on, any early players that you might be looking at for this week's RBC Heritage. So jump in chat. Would love to have the interaction. So let's do that. Let's do our initial research for the 2023 RBC Heritage. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. One moment, let me make sure all of my settings are going and whatnot. Seems to be working as I changed a few of the settings this past weekend, considering, the Masters and the DFS, or my DFS portion of the Masters was pretty much over before it started, thanks to Will Zalatoris. So I've been working on some settings. If you like them, don't like them, please let me know in the comments or in chat. Would appreciate that. But hopefully you don't see too much of a change, and then therefore they worked as I intended them. But let's get back to what we are here for. That is the RBC Heritage. We are at Harbortown Golf Links in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Again, another designated event on the PGA Tour right after the Masters, and a pretty big field, big name field this week, as you would expect for a designated event. The one player that I have seen that has withdrawn early so far this week is Alex Noren. Alex Noren is not in the field this week, or at least he has withdrawn. So do make that note as you begin your research this week. But Harbortown is a par 71 listed at 7,191 yards. That's actually on the long end. I have seen this course play to under 7,100 before. So they do have quite a bit of variability among tees, pin placements, and all that stuff. But it's certainly on the shorter end of the spectrum in terms of course length. So we are going to be looking at short course metrics this week and short course filters. Another filter that we're going to be looking at, we're going to skip around a little bit, Pete Dye. This is a Pete Dye design. So we have two very, very clear filters that we can look at from the beginning of the week in terms of short courses and Pete Dye. Some specifics around Harbortown. The stimp is listed at 11.5. You'll see that most of the time it's rated as fast, and we'll take a look at that in the historic conditions over at Fantasy National. But the listed stimp is at 11.5. These greens rival Pebble Beach in terms of some of the smallest on tour. That's another big factor or big talking point that you will hear a lot this week. These are some of the smallest greens on tour, right at 3,700 square feet. Not a whole lot of fairway, only 22 acres of fairway, but also not a whole lot of rough either, only 47 acres of rough. So the biggest thing with Harbortown, as with most Pete Dye designs, is that this is a positional style course. Sometimes it's better to be in the right rough than it is than the left fairway, just the way the whole contours and tree lined and all that stuff. So that's a very common practice with Pete Dye, is that he messes with eye sights and eye lines and all that stuff. So not a lot of fairway. So don't get too hung up in the fact that it will appear that the fairways are difficult to hit. A lot of times players know that it is better to miss the fairway on the correct side as opposed to be in the fairway on the wrong side. Hopefully that makes sense. Another distinguishing feature of Harbortown, 18 holes. That's right, water is in play on every single hole. So big numbers very, very quickly can add up here. The greens, Poa Trivialis Overseed is what is listed. That is the first I have seen of that. Generally it is listed as Bermuda. So Harbortown is generally not one of the courses that I gathered for the Poa Trivialis Overseed when we were working with the players and the waste management and all that stuff. So I'm quite interested in seeing some of the putting metrics to see if putters on those or at those tournaments also carry their success over here and all that. You also have perennial rye throughout the majority of the rest of the course on fairways and in the rough. The rough is generally not too high either, only about 2.5 inches. So not difficult to play out of. If the rough was long, then this course would be very, very difficult, as Pete Dye is pretty diabolical in his own right already. Some notes here: they did add a tee on number 7. That is contributing to the extra length. And then there were a few changes last year, as you can read in that second bullet, around some bunkerage and all that stuff. A wet winter followed by a warmer than normal February and cooler than normal March. I'm not an agronomist. I can't tell you how that is going to affect the course. My assumption is it's going to just play the same as usual, and we will take a look at Windfinder tomorrow for an early look at the forecast. But there is a look at Harbortown golf links from a GCSAA tournament fact point or tournament fact sheet standpoint. Some very small greens, some of the smallest on tour, rivaling Pebble Beach. Short course, Pete Dye course, and I'll be interested to see what we're going to do with some putting, as Harbortown is not one of the courses I generally gather for Poa Trivialis. I've always looked at this as Bermuda, so perhaps some adjustments need to be made on my end, and I'll be doing that tonight and into tomorrow. So there's a look at that. We're going to move to Fantasy National and just take a quick look at the players that are in the field this week. I have set this just for the beginning of this calendar year, again with a designated event. None of the live players are here, so your biggest names on the PGA Tour, again, your Masters champion John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Max Homa, Tony Finau, Xander, Sungjae, Patrick Cantlay, Tyrrell Hatton, just the biggest names on the PGA Tour here. Victor Hovland, Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, anybody and everybody is here. It is a designated event. So I don't want to spend too much time looking at an overview of the players. Let's just go ahead and go into the course breakdown at Fantasy National. First thing I always like to do, try to find the 9th and 10th most difficult holes, see where par falls. So the 10th most difficult still plays slightly over par. 12th still plays slightly over par. So in between the 12th and 13th most difficult holes is where par falls. That would signify that it is difficult. I don't know if it's going to be as difficult as what it might seem, at least initially, because you do have some very good scoring opportunities. The par 5 second plays to just a tad bit more than a half a shot under par. A pretty good eagle chance as well, 2.5 or slightly higher percent, but it is certainly a birdie hole. And your toughest hole, it is difficult, 2/10 over par, but you very quickly, and in another hole, 2/10 over par, but you very quickly get into, say, the teens and into the single digits in terms of difficulty. 1700ths, 1500ths, 1200ths. So this one hole definitely plays or brings the scoring average down, even though there are so many holes that technically play over par. And in fact, the other par 5 on the front 9 almost plays to a half a shot under par. So two very good scoring opportunities there will make the course look like it's going to play on the easier end of average, but just because of the sheer fact of number of holes that are over par, it plays right to average or maybe slightly on the more difficult end of average, but neither extreme. So at least early in the week, I'm not going to be looking at any scoring filters, any easy to par or difficult to par. I'm going to be focused on short courses and Pete Dye. But there's a look at the scorecard. Again, a par 71, so 2 par 5s on the front 9 that are very, very gettable, and then a par 35 with 1 par 5 on the back. That is a decent scoring opportunity, but certainly not the easiest that you will ever see. Only plays to a little bit over a 10th under par as a par 5. We move to strokes gained by shot type per round, and putting and approach are pretty dead equal here for the top 10s. Around the green, far outweighing off the tee, making it a slightly preferred short game course. We move to the top fives. You start to see that the ball striking does take a little bit of a lead. That is because the strokes gained approach really take off in comparison to all of the other metrics. And then for the winners, it's a Pete Dye course. You're going to have to hit your irons very well. Think of the other Pete Dye courses. There are the stadium course at the Amex, short course, but irons. The players, you always have to hit your irons very well. It is just a must that you be good with your irons. As longtime viewer P would say, boring golf generally plays pretty well on a Pete Dye design. And of course, if you're winning the tournament, you're expected to be making a lot of putts. But it is worth noting that consistently throughout the top 10, 5, and your winners, the around the green is going to outweigh off the tee. Distance is just not mandatory here at all. And in fact, fairway is not really either, as we talked about in the GCSIA portion of the show. Off the tee is just pretty darn mitigated here. It's all about your irons, and because these greens are small, you are going to have to be able to get up and down, putt well, and we'll take a look at some scrambling here in a little bit. I'm going to reset this for the top 10s. Strokes gained by hole by par. Par 5s, the three of them outweighing the others in terms of importance. I would not expect that to continue because there are only 3 par 5s. I want you to take a heavy focus on these par 4s here, as they will really gain in importance over the par 3s eventually. Although for the top 5s, it doesn't look to be that way. But I'm telling you, when we go to Microsoft Excel especially, the par 4s will really show their importance. And then for the winners, there you go. It's when you move from the top 5 to the winners, your par 4s are really commanding a whole lot of elite play over the par 3s. So par 5 scoring is the highest. It usually is, especially since they are generally your best chances at birdies on most PGA Tour courses, and including here at Harbour Town, your 2 easiest holes are par 5s. But with only 3 of them, don't ignore the par 4s. They are going to be very important this week, and that will be highlighted in Microsoft Excel later. All right, so hole composition here at Harbour Town. 3 of your 4 par 3s are from 175 to 200. You do have one that plays from 200 to 225 on the scorecard. So let's take a quick look. You got a 198, so that easily can stretch into the 200 plus. 192, the most difficult, the par 3 14th. 192 absolutely could stretch into the 200, and then 195. So all 3 of the par 3 gosh dang it. Yes, all 3 of the par 3s that measure 175 to 200 are 190 plus. So they could easily be stretched into the 200 plus. And in fact, the 200 plus measures right at 200. So very interchangeable in terms of lengths here. So don't get too caught up in the fact that 3 of the 4 are from 175 to 200. They all measure in between 190 and 200 on the scorecard. So we're going to take a look and see if this range matters the most. Maybe it's the 200 to 225, but I have a feeling it's just the par 3s in general. You do have a drivable par 4 here from 0 to 350. It is the par 4 9th at 332. In fact, it plays easier than the par 5 on the back. So a drivable par 4, a short par 4, not drivable, short par 4. The majority of your holes, of the holes here at Harbour Town, are par 4s that measure 400 to 450. You do have several that measure from 450 to 5 though as well. So Don't know how much we are going to take a look into the short par fours. Probably going to have a focus on the 400 to 450, maybe the 455. Microsoft Excel will definitely be able to help us distinguish which of those two links are the most important. And you see every single par 5 here at Harbour Town measures from 550 to 600. Approach shot distribution. Majority of approach shots here at Harbour Town, in fact a quarter of them, come from 175 to 200, and another 23% or so come from 150 to 175. So again, we'll see if these two ranges matter the most in terms of proximity. Not a whole lot of 200 plus. Again, this is not a long course, but you do get long iron approaches due to this being a Pete Dye course. Positional, you have to be very, very exact off the tee. So driver will not be used every single hole. So we'll see if proximity from these two ranges indeed are the most important for leaderboard success. Historic cut line moved to +1 last year, got all the way down to -3 in 2020. That would be classified as easy, but again, 2020 a tad bit of an outlier, not only in the year in itself, but Harbour Town was one of the first tournaments back from the COVID crap. It wasn't the first, but it was one of the first. So while I am including that year's data into it, because it was played in June, it wasn't something like the Corrales or the Masters that was played in an entirely different part of the year or even different season. It was a couple of months later, so I did keep it in, but at least statistically for Microsoft Excel. But do note this is a tad bit of an outlier. So +1 last year generally hovers in the +1 to +2 range. Has gotten a bit easier over the years, as you can see. Again, reinforcing the fact that it's about an average difficulty course. Probably plays a bit more on the difficult end because, as you see here, 18% birdies. You have 15.5% bogeys, but you do have a fair amount of doubles. Again, every single hole at Harbour Town has water in play, so big numbers can come up and get you quickly. And the eagles are relatively non-existent. You've got a decent eagle chance, the par 5 second. I mean, even the par 5 fifth isn't really a great eagle chance. It's a good birdie chance. And then the par 5 on the back is closer to a traditional 3-shot hole than it is an eagle chance. So there's your scoring distribution again. Plays to average, maybe a tad bit on the difficult end just due to the amount of doubles that can come into play. Driving accuracy is much higher here. And that is because players know that they have to be exact off the tee. Fairways are not going to be a big factor. Again, I will re-emphasize that. Driver is not used on every single par 4. So don't get caught up in the fairways. Instead, we're going to be focusing on greens. These greens are some of the smallest on tour. Only 58% green regulation percentage, where the average green regulation percentage on the PGA Tour is over 65%. So pretty difficult to hit these greens. We're going to be focusing on greens and regulation this week. Now, scrambling here is easier than the average tour event. So it is not difficult to scramble here. So I'm not sure how much we're going to be looking at scrambling. We might just be looking at around the green, since it consistently is much higher than the off the tee for your top 10s, 5s, and winners. 3 putts, again, these greens are small, some of the smallest on tour, so 3 putts aren't really too much of a thing here. It's not going to be looking at that, but just to emphasize the exacting nature that you have to have off the tee here, look at the distance. This is probably one of the shortest courses, if not the shortest course on tour. 268 here at Harbour Town versus a 283 at the average tour event. Almost 15 full yards less off the tee here. And then green and regulation proximity. Even though the greens here are about 40% smaller than the average tour green, You see the proximity isn't really all that much closer. 27.1 against 29.1 on the average tour event. So only 2 feet closer. That is a decent amount, but not to the 40% level. So again, we'll see how much proximity matters. So there's a look at Harbour Town from a Fantasy National scorecard and graphical view. Before we go back to the player tab, let's take a look at some of these historic conditions. Last year, played to right at average. You had a round that was difficult, probably because the wind picked up quite a bit. You did have one round of easy, and then the other 2 were average, so play right at average. All of 2021 was average. 2020 played pretty easy, but then the majority of the time it is played average to even difficult. Again, this is why I'm not going to do anything specific with scoring filters early on this week. Now, if we see that the wind is picked up or maybe completely died down or whatnot, in the forecast tomorrow we might change that, but at least tonight I'm not going to do anything with scoring filters. You see the greens have always been classified as Bermuda, so I'm going to have to do some investigation and see if Poa Trivialis is new here, or if maybe I've just been not collecting Harbour Town, and I should be. So I'm going to have to do some investigation for you all on that. They've always been classified as Bermuda, but we saw in the GCSA Tournament fact sheet that they are Poa Trivialis overseed, which is the same as the Players, the Valspar, Waste Management, and all of those that I talked about seemingly for the past couple months. You see hitting fairways, easy, difficult, average, everywhere. Now the rough has always been short, so it's not difficult to play out of. That is typical with a Pete Dye course. He does not want long rough unless it's going to be a major, because he wants to reward players who are on the correct side of the hole approaching the green. Green speeds have oscillated between average and fast. I would have thought they would have been fast the majority of the time, but it looks like we might be just looking at Poa Trivialis in general, not even a speed filter. And then course length, you see, has always been short. The wind can pick up here, so we'll take a look at Wind Finder tomorrow. And of course, it's a Pete Dye design. So now we'll take a look at the player tab here in Fantasy National. Let's take a quick look at a few things here. Again, this is a Pete Dye course. Iron play approach is going to be so very important. So, since the beginning of this calendar year, your top strokes gained approach players in the field this week for the RBC Heritage: Tom Hoagie, Max Homa, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, John Rahm, Ricky Fowler, Colin Morikawa, Xander Schauffele, Wyndham Clark, and Tyrrell Hatton. I also want to take a look at some around the green. Around the green is going to be a bit of a factor, I believe, this week. So your top around the green players: Justin Thomas, Jimmy Walker, Jason Day, Ben Griffin, Chris Kirk, Patrick Rogers, Zach Blair, Jordan Spieth, Brendan Todd, and Adam Schenk. Not going to do much with putting tonight. Again, I need to do some more research around the Poa Trivialis versus Bermuda and all that stuff. But instead, let's take a look at a couple of kind of overarching filters. First thing we're going to do, this course is short. Even though it measures close to 7,200 yards, I believe that is going to be on the long end of the spectrum. So let's take a look. Actually, let's go back a full 2 years like we have done with long courses. So since the beginning of 2021, on short courses, your top performers in the field this week: Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, Russell Henley, Xander Schauffele, Sung Jae, Corey Connors, Victor Hovland, Chris Kirk, Tony Finau, and Siwoo Kim. So there's your top short course performers. And something else that we definitely want to take a look at: Pete Dye designs. Players who generally play Pete Dye designs at one Pete Dye design generally play all Pete Dye designs well. So again, the same timeline since the beginning of 2021. Your top performers on Pete Dye Designs have been Shane Lowry, Sung Jae, Corey Connors, Brian Harmon, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Terrell Hatton, Victor Hovland, Tony Finau, and Colin Morikawa. So I think that's going to do it in terms of a look at the statistics in Fantasy National, at least for tonight. Let's go ahead and move to the Tournament History tab and see who has played this event the best over the past 5 years. And in those 5 years, your top strokes gained total player is Webb Simpson, your champion in 2020. He has two other top 10s, another top 20. Now, he was very middling to a clunker finish last year, but this was at the height, really, of his injury, or at least when his injury started to become known. He loves Harbour Town. Harbour Town is built for Webb Simpson. So if healthy, take a long look at Webb Simpson. Matt Kuchar, also somebody that you really need to pay attention to. He has 2 top 5s here in the past 5 years. Another top 20, a top 25, a middling in 2020. He is also a former champion back in 2015. I'll have to double check that. We can do that in Microsoft Excel. I've brought that stuff over, but he is a former champion here as well. So right off the bat, you get the sense of the kind of players that really excel at Harbour Town. Guys that don't need length off the tee. Instead are very good putters and very good generally with their irons. Good evening, Joanne. Thanks for jumping in chat. I hope you had a much better Masters week than I did. You have caught just a little bit of the Fantasy National portion for Harbour Town. But thanks again for jumping in chat. Really appreciate it. And thanks for tuning in after such a disaster of a week that I had. So there's your top 2 strokes gained total performers here at Harbour Town. Patrick Cantlay, somebody else who plays Pete Dye Designs very well. Now, he has missed the cut once in those 5 years, but his other 3 performances were all top 10s, 2 of them being podium finishes, a runner-up last year and a T3rd in 2019. JT Poston, somebody else who loves short courses. He, too, has missed the cut once, but has 3 top 10s here in the past 5 years. Shane Lowry, we saw the number 1 strokes gained total player on Pete Dye Designs. 3 top 10s. Now, he did miss the cut as well, but 3 top 10s. Matthew Fitzpatrick has been very good here. Billy Horschel has been pretty darn good here. CT Pan, winner in 2019. 2021 was Stuart Sink. Let's see, 2018, Satoshi Kodaira. So again, all of these players are not long off the tee. They don't need length to be successful here. Stuart Sink is actually probably the outlier, as he picked up quite a bit of length coming into the 2021 season. It was a resurgent year for him. But all of these other players, Webb Simpson, CT Pan, Satoshi Kodaira, they do not depend on length for their success, and you don't need length to succeed here at Harbour Town. Joanne, because you jumped in chat late, I don't know how much you missed from the beginning of the show, but the one field change that we know of so far is that Alex Noren has withdrawn, so make sure you make a note of that. Early on in your research or preparation this week, Alex Noren has withdrawn. But there's a look at some of your top performers here at Harbour Town the past 5 years. The other end of the spectrum, players that have not played this event very well. Surprisingly, Chez Reavie, somebody who doesn't rely on length, but he has not played this event very well. Mackenzie Hughes, for as much as around the green can be a factor here at Harbour Town, he has not played well here. Andrew Putnam generally likes short courses. He is 0 for 4 here the past 5 years. You see Satoshi Kodaira, the winner in 2018, but some very, very poorer finishes since. Bo Hostler, not very good. Jim Furyk is a former champion here, although back in 2012 or 2013, back in more of his prime. Obviously, this is Champions Tour Jim Furyk. He has not fared well lately here. Adam Schenk, KH Lee. Let's see. Let's look at some others here. Brian Gay, for somebody who is more short game oriented, much more in the putting. He has not fared well here. Ben On has a top 10 and 3 missed cuts. Tom Hoagie is only 2 for 5 at making the cut here. A top 25, a middling to clunker, and then 3 missed cuts. Now, Wyndham Clark is 4 for 4 in making the cut, but you see that his strokes gained total is still some of the lowest. Wyndham Clark is somebody who relies on distance, and this is a course you just cannot overpower. You cannot do it, so you have to be very, very precise with your irons. You have to have a good putting week. So Wyndham Clark is somebody else who has struggled here at Harbour Town. There's a look at the worst performers the past 5 years here at Harbour Town. Let's transition over to Microsoft Excel and start looking at Harbour Town and the RBC Heritage from a little bit more intensive data perspective than what we get at Fantasy National, or at least broken out specifically in courses, and then we'll look at the players. You see, off the tee, as much as this is saying it is 20% more important, I'm just going to have to disagree with that assessment from the raw data. Had a break-even week. It was great. Hey, if you broke even this week with the Masters and all the craziness that happened, I would say that was a successful week. So well done on that. You must have avoided a lot of the Rory chalk, and or you had enough of Rahm and Brooks and Patrick Reed and all these other players. So well done on a break-even week in a week where a lot of things didn't go according or as expected. So well done with that. Let's take a look at some of the specific data, as I believe that number is going to be a little bit misleading. And to be honest with you, the raw data here has been pretty darn consistent. Now, the off the tee has dropped in importance a little bit the past 3 years, but nothing extraordinary. At least for your players that finish in the top 10, 5, and winners, the around the green was more important, but for your players that are finishing in the top 30, it is clearly much more of an off the tee course. So this could be a situation where, since I'm gathering the top 30, that's where the data is, where that data is not correlating with Fantasy National. I still think this is going to be an around the green type because if you look, the off the tee has steadily been declining over the years at the RBC Heritage, while the around the green has steadily been increasing in importance. So I expect that trend to continue. We also see that the approach is the most important shot type here. You had a couple of lower years in there as well. Putting also going to be somewhat important, although with it being listed as Poa Trivialis and Fantasy National labeling it as Bermuda, I'll be interested to see and do my research this week as is the Poa Trivialis new, is the Bermuda generally alive at this time of year. So I'll have to go back and check. But in terms of in relation to other courses, the only thing I'm going to about agree with on this is the approach being 9 to 10% more important than the average full field course. This is a Pete Dye design after all. Strokes gained approach is going to be very, very important. I do believe these two metrics are a bit misleading. Since I'm gathering the top 30, we only looked at the top 10, 5s, and winners in Fantasy National. So I do think around the green is going to be more important. But moving across here, the distance you see is very clearly not a factor. We saw that graphically We'll see that in the raw numbers. Distance is just not a factor here. You don't need distance to win. Look at your previous winners. Webb Simpson's, your Matt Kuchar's, C.T. Pan, Satoshi Kodaira. It's not about distance. It really, really isn't. Really fairways either. Even though these fairways can be difficult to hit, players generally club down or hit irons, hit fairway metals or whatever. You see fairways are 20% less important. Surprising to me to see greens 5% less important, but these greens are very, very difficult to hit. And you see we've got a couple of very low numbers in here. I expect greens is going to be the big factor that we focus on in that tab this week. Maybe good drives gained, but I'm much more leaning towards greens early on this week. Scoring, right now the bigger raw number is in the birdies gained. You see the bogeys has a pretty large significant outlier here. Doubles could be something that we want to look at. It's been pretty consistent, and every single hole at Harbor Town has water in play, so maybe doubles is something we want to look at. In fact, if we come and look at Harbor Town against other full field courses on the PGA Tour, everything is negative except for double avoidance. So maybe it's doubles that we want to look at, but we'll definitely go through the prior leaderboards tomorrow night and get a feel for birdies versus bogeys and what's leading to more upper end success. But at least early on, perhaps double bogey avoidance is what we want to look at. All right, par 3s, 4s, and 5s. This will be pretty interesting for me. Par 3s, 8% less important. I think I would probably agree with that. We saw that they're just not all that important here at Harbor Town. Even though this is only a par 71, it's really the par 4s that mandate a lot of your attention. Having said that, 3 of the 4 par 3s do measure from 175 to 200. All 3 in this range are 190 plus. There was a 192, 195, and a 198, I believe. We went through that earlier in the show, so if I'm wrong, you can correct me or at least go back earlier in the show and see the specifics. But all 3 of the par 3s in this range measure to 190 plus, and then the 1 par 3 in this range measures right at 200. So all of them are right in this little cutoff range here. However, at least against other full field courses, it's saying that the 175 to 200 are the most important. We come across here. Oh my gosh, yeah, look at this. So 1.08 out of 1.33 total. Now the par 3s have gotten more important in the past 3 years compared to the 2019 and 2018. So the par 3s are rising in significance. But take a look at this massive percentage that the 175 to 200 make out of your total par 3s. So this is telling me that we only want to look at the 175 to 200 range when a specific range makes up 75 to 80% of the strokes gained total. That just means that it's just that range. So, or it makes that range the only range you want to look at. So we're going to be looking at 175 to 200, at least statistically. Raw numbers and compared to other full field courses, it's backing that up completely. So interesting observation to start this week. So there's all of your focus on par 3s needs to be in the 175 to 200. Par 4s, saying a 0.5% more important than full field courses. Okay. You see there was an extremely low outlier. Now that's an extremely high one as well. So if you erase these, you're probably going to even out, really. 4.42, 4.39, so it decreases just a tad. A specific range looks like it would be the 400 to 450, as it's making up roughly half. I know it's a little bit more than that, but roughly half of the totality of par 4s. So 400 to 450. Now, it's not to say that the 450 to 5s need to be ignored, but certainly there looks to be some credence to looking at 400 to 450 separately. And if we scroll across here, yeah, so 30% more important than the average full field course are these 400 to 450s here at Harbor Town versus other full field courses. Now the drivable par 4, I don't know how much I want to put a lot of weight into this because not every single course has a drivable par 4. As you can see here, the Charles Colonial doesn't, Detroit doesn't, even Sedgefield doesn't have a drivable par 4. So not sure I want to do anything or at least look specifically at the 0 to 350 par 4, but at least data-wise, early this week, looks like the 400 450 is worth looking at on its own. And then par 5s, very consistent. And as a statistical analyst, that I love this, seeing the consistency year after year, how important or not something is. And these par 5s, even though against other full field courses aren't going to look all that important, they are 3 of your 4 best chances here. They're your best birdie chances. Now in totality, they are probably mitigated a little bit because you have 2 par 5s that are very, very gettable. 550 and 556 maybe. They're on the shorter end, but all 3 par 5s at Heritage measure in this range here, the 550 to 6. So you have a 0.83 out of 1.63. So again, roughly half are into here, or at least half of your strokes gained come from this range. But you see these par 5s can play shorter. They can drop into the 500 550, and it does appear that they do have some significance on some leaderboard success. So we might be just looking at strokes gained par 5. I'll be interested to see how it looks in the leaderboards or in the prior leaderboards tomorrow night. Finally, let's look at proximity, and we saw that the majority of approach shots here at Harbor Town come in these 2 lengths here, 150 to 175, 175 to 2. And in fact, look here, I can tell you that's a pretty big number there. And it has been very, very consistent minus this kind of outlier here. So 175 to 200 looks to be a very, very important range. And if you look at the 150 to 175, it has decreased in terms of its importance over the years. So that leads me to think that the 175 to 200 is the proximity we want to look at. And my goodness, 131% more important. Now, that looks like a horrendously outlier type number, but every single course does yield 175 to 200 yard approaches if we gather proximity data. We don't get it from the Zozo, Bermuda, Mayakoba, these international or non-continental U.S. Tournaments that don't have shot length, but every other tournament does gain 175 to 200. That is, I knew that was a massive number, but that is the most important. This is the most important course for 175 to 200 yard approaches, which coincidentally, or maybe not, is also the most important range of par 3. So, okay, makes a whole lot of sense now when you start to think about it in the totality of Harbor Town. 175 to 200 is a massive factor here. So we're going to be taking a long look at 175 to 200 this week in terms of proximity. So there's a look at Harbor Town and the RBC Heritage in terms of a raw data perspective and comparing it to other full field courses. We're going to end the night on the early look file. Again, this is the tournament history tab from Fantasy National brought over to Microsoft Excel. The past 5 years and players' specific performance at whatever metric is in question. So you can see your top average finish in the past 5 years is Cameron Young. He's only played it once. It was a third. And as you would expect from a Cameron Young, very, very good to elite off the tee. He was very good around the green that week. His irons were pretty good. He just didn't putt well. Now, Seamus Power was very good with his short game. His week might have been last year, might have been 2021, but he finished 6th. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to filter out the players that have not played it often. So I want to get players that have played it 3, 4, or all 5 of the past 5 years. I want to see where these players are having the majority of their success. So you see, again, Webb Simpson was your top strokes gained total player by 1/100th of a stroke over Matt Kuchar. You see Matt Kuchar, Webb Simpson, top 2 here in terms of average finish. Doing it slightly different ways. Webb Simpson's been doing it more in the ball striking. Lots of strokes gained approach. Still doing very well off the tee. Matt Kuchar has been doing very, very well on these greens. And if I recall, I believe he's a very good Poa Trivialis putter as it is too. So again, more research that I'll have to do tomorrow in preparation for the Data Dive show for you all tomorrow night to see how much Poa Trivialis versus Bermuda. But you see Matt Kuchar's doing it with the putting. Webb Simpson's been doing it in ball striking. Patrick Cantley's been doing it in ball striking. JT Poston's been doing it more with the short game. His irons have not actually been all that good here, but he's making up for it in the short game. Joel Damon, 3 for 3 here, average of a top 25. He's been ball striking it very well and putting well. It's always a very good combination to have. Shane Lowry's just been good everywhere, or across his entire bag, if you will. Noren, need to remove him. He is not in the field this week, or he's withdrawn. Matthew Neesmith, as you would expect, a whole lot of in the irons, not so much in the putting. Okay, if we take a look here, let's take a look at players who we'll say average maybe a top. Let's see, this is 18 players. Yeah, top 40, average of a top 40, just to get a decent number here. All right, so as much as I have talked about off the tee probably not mattering too much, look here. Every single player that has averaged a top 40 at the RBC Heritage in the past 5 years, they've all been positive and off the tee. I mean, I'm surprised by it, but the facts, those are just the facts. Every single player has been positive off the tee. So that's an average of a 1.5. This is a 1.5. Around the green is going to be quite a bit less. It's a 0.2. And the putting, 1.7. So the putting has actually been the highest, but it's quite a bit more volatile. You have Colin Morikawa, who generally is not a good putter as it is. Neesmith's not a very good putter. Everybody else, look at that. Everybody else other than those two who are known for not being good putters, everyone else is positive in putting as well. Very interesting to see that. Okay. So again, for your players that have averaged a top 40, 1.5, 1.5, only a 0.2, and a 1.7. Scrolling across distance, Sepp Straka's had a lot of distance here, but again, it's just not a huge factor. Kuchar, even in terms of distance at the course, he's been negative. You just don't have to have distance here. Simpson's been slightly positive, but again, that's just based on the fact that he might be hitting driver where others are hitting 3-woods. Cantley's been positive in distance, but it's just not a huge factor. The one thing that I did want to see in that tab was greens. And in fact, okay, so it did kind of tail off here at the bottom end for the players that have averaged the top 40. But up until Palmer, Thompson, and Harmon, you only had one player that was negative in greens. You see Neesmith's been stellar in greens and regulation. Morikawa, Fitzpatrick, Sepp Straka. So greens and regulation looks to be the big factor in this tab. That's a 2.2. just to compare against good drives gained, 2.0, pretty close, but it looks like it is, in fact, the greens in regulation that we want to focus on this week. Scoring, Eagles just not a thing here. You've got one good eagle chance, one decent eagle chance, and then the par 5 on the back is much closer to a traditional 3-shot hole than it is an eagle chance. Of your top consistent elite players at Harbortown specifically, looks to be much more in the bogey avoidance than the birdies gained. For that same top 40, this is a 2.2. It's a 1.9, so it's fairly close, but looks like the bogey avoidance is the more important of the two. It could be another week where we're looking at double bogey avoidance. Perhaps. All right, par 3s. Interesting to see Matt Kuchar is negative at the length of par 3s here, but you can see to the right of your screen, this is where he's doing a lot of his damage, and that's why I was saying I think the par 4s are going to be, even though they showed only about 0.5% or 1% more important than the average full field, or the average full field course. I think that's a bit misleading. I think par 4s are going to be very important, but at least par 3 wise, we saw that everything in terms of strokes gained total was in this length of par 3 here. And you can kind of see that for these players that have played it consistently and consistently well. Majority of their strokes gained are in the 175 to 200 for par 3s. But I don't know how much I'm going to be doing in par 3s because we're going to be putting a whole lot of attention into par 4s and the 400 450. Now, Sepp Straka has been very bad at that length of par 4. He's about the only one that's been bad, and he's been atrocious for sure. Matthew Neesmith hasn't been good. He's been better at the short par 4s. But everybody else that has played, especially the players that have played Harbortown at an elite level, have been really excelling on these 400 to 450 par 4s. Again, it makes me much more confident in the data for the 400 to 450, especially. And then par 5s, if there was a range, it was this one, because all 3 par 5s do measure to this length, but the 2 on the front 9 will come down into this range a little bit. Let's see. Just to give you an idea, so this is a 1.0 in terms of strokes gained total. The par 5s were a 1.0 for the players that have averaged the top 40. This is a 3.1, so already 3 times the importance of the par 5s. And then the par 3s, a 0.7. So, again, just re-emphasizing the fact that I think the par 3s are pretty mitigated. Par 5s, they'll have some significance, but it's really the par 4s. Anyway, I realized I had forgotten to do the strokes gained total in these specific pars, so wanted to make sure I did that. The par 5s, really, I mean, you got Joel Damon, who hasn't played them well, and then Billy Horschel, but otherwise, players, especially in the top 35, have played the par 5s at least with a modicum of success. So I don't know if we'll be focusing on a specific length. Might just be the par 5s, because again, even though all 3 measured to here on the scorecard, 2 of them are so close to the 550 cutoff that they do come into this range reasonably often. All right, last thing I want to look at for the evening is proximity, and particularly the 175 to 200. And Matt Kuchar has not been very good at that length. He hasn't been great at proximity in general here, but that would probably make some sense because, again, remember, he's been just putting the ever-living daylights out of it here. So he's been gaining all of his success with the putter. Webb Simpson, you see, he's probably leading in terms of procs total of all the players who have played it consistently. Again, his best range, 175 to 200. Patrick Cantlay, 175 to 200. Poston's not been very good in proximity. So if we take a look at this, 24 and a half. This is a 13. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to go down a couple more. That's even less now because of the negatives. So of the players who have played it well, consistently well, it does look like the 175 to 200 would be the most important range, but it's not so much of a disqualifier if somebody's not good at it. You can see Kuchar's not been great from that range. Poston's not been great from that range. Yet Poston has 3 top 10s and a missed cut. Matt Kuchar's 5 for 5 here, a former champion. I don't think total procs is going to be something. If we are looking at proximity, it'll be the 175 to 200. But there's a look at the top players. Oh, sorry, that was the ice in the water bottle. These are your top players consistently at Harbor Town and how they've done at the 175 to 200. And it's pretty correlating, it looks like. All right, so that's going to do it for the initial research show this evening. I'll bring back everybody that is in the field this week and sort it on average finish. Joanne, thanks for jumping in chat. Really appreciate it. Happy to hear that you had a break-even week, which, considering all the mayhem and chaos that happened at the Masters this week, I would consider that a success. Certainly much better than what I did. I play college baseball, so I enjoy shutouts just as much as the next person. Unfortunately, I pitched a shutout against myself. I think it's the first time that I didn't cash a lineup. One single lineup did not cash. So we're going to try to get back on the winning ways this week for the RBC Heritage and at Harbor Town. So thanks, Joanne, for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who tuned in, watched, listened, supports the channel by commenting, liking the video, subscribing. Always appreciate it. And once again, a very, very happy and blessed Easter to all of you, for he is risen. For all of the wagers that you made this past week at the Masters, for all of the DFS contests you entered this past week at the Masters, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Day to Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.